and it really does hide one of the most scenic river cruises we've ever seen. You often hear this area called the Thailand of Albania, but honestly, seeing these limestone cliffs rise up from the water, it feels like something entirely its own. After being closed off from the rest of the world for nearly half a century, it's amazing to see how much of this raw beauty has remained untouched, actually. We noticed these new wooden structures along the banks. They can only be reached by the river, which gives you an idea of just how remote this area really is. Later on, we had the chance to walk through the heart of the Dukagjini Canyons. This whole region is really defined by this rugged, isolated terrain, where wild rivers like the Shala have carved these dramatic paths through the rock over centuries. It's a steep, rocky landscape that's been tucked away for so long. And walking here, you really feel the scale of the isolation that kept this part of Europe a secret. But to get this deep into the mountains, we had to be ready for a very long day. It all began at 6:30 in the morning, back in a quiet public square. Our trip out to Lake Komani and the Shala River was, well, it was quite an experience really. A lot of people call this area the Thailand of Albania, so we wanted to see if the reality actually lived up to the name. It was a long day that started well before the sun was up, but the journey through those canyons was worth the early start. It was mid-September, and the street lamps were still on, but you could see the light was already getting quite bright. It felt a bit strange being out at that hour, but it was the only way to catch the boat. Even though we have our own vehicle here in Albania, we'd been advised not to drive it because the roads are really rough, actually. So we booked this tour with a local travel company. There was this large fountain in the middle of the square, but no water was sprouting. I suppose it was just a bit too early for them to have it running, really. The bus ride was quite bumpy, actually, so we were really glad we hadn't taken our own car. Once we arrived, we had to walk through this tunnel, which was the only way to get through to where the boats depart. I actually didn't expect it to be this busy, but the pier was buzzing with people and boats of all sizes. Even though it looks like a natural wonder, Lake Komani is actually a man-made reservoir created back in the 80s for a massive hydroelectric project. It's interesting, really, because while we were there for the scenery, for the locals, this waterway is a lifeline. We saw the old ferries that have been running for decades, like the ones heading out to Fiesole. Before the newer highways were built, these boats were the only way to move cars and supplies through these mountains. You still see the local commuters mixed in with the travelers, and it's a good reminder that even though it's become a tourist highlight, it's still a working river that connects some of the most remote communities in Albania. Because of that early 6:30 pickup, we hadn't actually had any breakfast yet. We headed into the restaurant to grab a bite, and they even told us the coffee was on the house, which was a really nice gesture, actually. That gentleman in the blue t-shirt is actually the owner of the tour company and the restaurant. He's the same one who answered the phone when we called, really. All our hosts during our 3-week road trip were incredibly friendly and helpful. You'll see more of those interactions in our upcoming videos, actually. But for now, we are Kathy and Roy. Our niece, Ornella, joined us for the last 2 weeks too. She'd just come off a really long flight to get here. If you're enjoying the journey, please like, subscribe, and comment below on whether you'd ever consider a 6:30 start for a trip like this. It really helps us out. Thank you. That blue boat you see pulling away is the Barisha car ferry. It was just starting its run over to Fiers. It's a really vital link through these mountains, taking about 2.5 hours to cross the lake, and it returns later the same day actually. For people heading up toward the Valbona Valley, this is often called one of the most beautiful boat rides in the world. It was quite a sight to see them loading cars onto such a narrow vessel, but it's just part of daily life out here. So finally, we were on the boat and heading to what the locals call Blini Park. We had to wait for the ferries and larger boats to depart first, but we were finally on our way actually. That's Kathy on the left and Ornella on the right. They snagged the only 2 chairs on the sun deck. I preferred staying in the shade under the canopy. It was really much more comfortable out of the sun actually. We saw that boat driving fast with just a few passengers. It must be one of the boats for places you really can't reach by road, I suppose. To our left and right, we have these rolling hills covered in thick greenery. They aren't those towering cliffs just yet. It is really lush through here, likely because of the moisture from the lake, I'd imagine. It's still pretty wide through here. The narrow parts are really ahead of us, actually. We spotted those 2 wooden cabins on a distant bank, standing all by themselves. It must be new construction to cater to the people slowly discovering this area, though it really looks like the work isn't quite finished yet. We saw some houses tucked away, and behind them were these steep mountains with no visible roads anywhere. It really makes you wonder how they managed to transport all the building material. I'm guessing it all had to come in by boat, I suppose. See, that path also leads right down to the water. I suppose that really is the only way in or out of here, actually. We saw those 3-story buildings made of white stone and wood. We'd love to stay there next time. But managing suitcases up all these steps would be a challenge, really. The canyon walls were really starting to get higher now. It was quite a change, actually. The walls weren't just getting higher, the passage was really becoming narrower as we moved along. I wondered what was actually waiting beyond here. It was starting to feel quite tucked away, really. We saw the skipper standing right at the bow. He was giving these quick hand signals to help navigate the narrow passage. It was really funny, actually. He still found a bit of time to take a few photos with his phone between instructions. I suppose even he gets impressed by the scenery sometimes. My 2 ladies were right there in the front. They'd snagged the only 2 chairs on the deck and were really obstructing my view, honestly. But then again, it really could have been 2 strangers blocking the way instead. At least this way, I actually knew the people in my shot, I suppose. I really wondered if it was going to get any narrower than this. It felt like the boat was heading toward the narrowest part of the whole trip, actually. I thought we were finally entering the Dukagjini Canyon right then, and it looked like it really had to be the river mouth. It was actually the very river that cut through these limescale rocks and made the canyon in the first place, I suppose. I really didn't think we could have been far from the Blini Island at that point. It felt like we were getting close, actually. Arriving at the Blini Park, we saw all the empty boats moored there. So we weren't the only ones to wake up early, I suppose. I really wondered if we could get out without wetting our shoes, actually, seeing all the boats in front of us. It looked like we didn't have to wet our shoes after all. Our skipper pulled the front of the boat right onto a dry gravel area, which was really lucky, I suppose. The first impression of Blini Island was just how colourful it all was. The buildings and structures used wood quite extensively, which I suppose is really environmentally friendly for the area, actually. I really didn't trust the rickety wooden bridge, actually. I suppose it felt a bit thin. But Kathy and Ornella were already on the bridge, so I really had no choice but to follow them, I suppose. It felt a bit shaky underfoot, actually. The water was so clear and really inviting, but we hadn't brought our swimming things, actually. I suppose it would have been nice to jump in the cold water for a bit. We thought it was about time to grab some lunch, and further down the canyon we saw some restaurants with really nice views over the water. It looked like the perfect spot, actually. We saw someone at the firewood oven, baking potatoes, I think. The open fire was where Kathy and Ornella's fish was grilled, I suppose. There really was no menu here. You just got what you saw that day, actually.
He's also enjoying the sun. Yeah.
Well, this was the view we had while we had our lunch. It really was something, looking out over the canyon from our table like that, I suppose. So I thought this was where the canyon started, actually. And to our right was a branch of the Shala River. It really felt like we were entering it then, I suppose. We were walking along the canyon with the branch of the Shala on our right. There were dozens of sun umbrellas all along this bank, and plenty of people were out sunbathing actually. It really felt like a hidden holiday spot, I suppose.
And the best here, it's not too deep. The water is not too deep.
On the side of the bank, close to the water, there were these houses built in wood. They looked quite new, probably built to cater to new visitors coming to this area. It was interesting to see how they've used the timber to blend in with the surroundings, really. We also saw these little wooden bridges. They're for the people living in those new houses to cross over to this side. Just behind the buildings, the ground just rose sharply upwards. It was a really steep climb into the mountainside from there, actually.
This clean spot?
Clean spot.
It's a German name.
German name, yeah.
Right, okay. So how did you get your German name?
What?
How did you get the German name?
Apparently the skipper has taken a liking to Kathy. I suppose she was the favorite passenger on the boat that day. Heading out of the canyon felt like a really new trip, honestly. I can guarantee that the view was completely different. Mostly because the sun had moved and the light was hitting the landscape from a totally different angle. This part of the journey was like a whole new experience. Guess what? I suppose you wouldn't even realize it was the same stretch of water we'd seen earlier, actually. See there, it was completely different actually. The light didn't hit those cliffs like that on the way in. It really changed the whole look of the canyon, I suppose. I also thought the light had gotten a bit softer, almost smoothing out the shadows. It looked like a brand new journey. It really felt like we were seeing the place for the first time, actually. We saw a boat heading the other way. I really wondered where they were heading to, actually. I suppose they were just starting their own journey, really. It was late in the afternoon by the time we finally got back to the start. It really felt like just the beginning of our trip, I suppose. Since the country was isolated for such a long time, there was still so much more that we saw during our journey here. I suppose you'll want to stay tuned to see the other things we found in Albania. It was quite a discovery, actually.